everyone. Welcome to Time to Thrive. It's your host, Bethany Meadows. More than ever, marketing strategies are focused on providing value through content. We talk about it here on the show all the time. One of the ways many business owners and entrepreneurs are seeking to establish thought leadership as part of an overall content marketing strategy is through podcasts. According to recent data, almost 60% of U.S. consumers 12 years and older listen to podcasts. What's more, the number of podcast listeners has literally doubled over the last 10 years. Our guest today is Adam Adams. After selling his first podcast focused on real estate, and he sold that first podcast, which, who knew that was a thing? Adam launched the Podcast on Podcasting, which is ranked as a top show for podcasters. He is also the founder of GrowYourOwnShow.com, where their clients are getting ranked in the top 1% on iTunes and other top charts. Welcome to the show, Adam.
Thank you so much. And I will make one quick correction. It's GrowYourShow.com, just the 3 words. So don't add the third, don't add own. Don't say grow your own show, because I don't know whose website that is, but it's not ours.
I'm
Grow
so
your
sorry.
show.
All right, grow your show.
No, it's all good. It's all good. But I'm stoked to be part of the show. I'm really looking forward to it, and anything we can do to add value to somebody listening who is a business owner. I'm really looking forward to it. I'm really excited. So thank you for having me. I also wrote down a couple of those stats that you shared, because those were very interesting, with the 60% of people listening to podcasts right now.
Right.
That's much bigger than it used to be. That's awesome.
Yeah. Well, I gotta admit something to you, like confession time right here on the front end. Transparency is everything, right? I listened to one of your recent podcast episodes, just in anticipation, just like, who's Adam Adams? What's he all about? And the episode was titled 5 Interview Questions You Could Consider. And I thought, wow, I need to listen to this, right? As a podcast host, I should know these podcast questions.
Cool.
And the first thing out of the gate, you just got me on the worst question to start a podcast with is tell me your story. And then you gave all the reasons why. Well, I always do that. So immediately I'm being corrected.
Oh boy.
And you've already added value. Just on that front, from now on, I'm gonna have a better first question. And so here's my first question for you. What is the best first question to ask someone in an interview?
I love that. Well, let's process this. On that episode that you're talking about on podcasting, it was one of my more recent episodes. I talked about pod decks, these like little interview decks, which help. And
I've already gone and bought them.
Oh, cool.
Got them. I just thought that was great.
So I will say that I don't know if it's the absolute best first question to ask, but what I am starting to do myself is grab pod decks, grab one of the questions. I'm just going to get a random one right now.
And it's
saying, when you're feeling sick, what makes you feel better? That's an interesting thing. So I'll answer this one today for you. This will be the best first question today.
Okay. Awesome.
So pod decks, there's like 50 different questions in here, and they're all different. What is the best present you ever received? Would you ever travel to space if possible? Who would be the best female robot model in your life? What do you feel people complain about too much these days? If you swap genders for a day, how would you spend it? So there's all these interesting things. And here's why I like these as a potential first question, and why I'm starting to use them as a first question for me. It's because they tend to put your guest slightly off guard. So many guests are professional guests. What I mean by that is they get on tons of different podcasts. They might even be paying so that they could get on tons of different podcasts. And because they're spending money and so much time getting their story out, they have really perfected things. Like there was this guy who's into wind turbines, solar panels, and anything green energy. There was this guy, not going to name names. Maybe your listener has heard him a couple of times. Who knows? The point would be that he's completely scripted. He wants you to ask exact questions, and he's going to say the same thing. And if you hear him on 72 different episodes, it's always going to be the same. It'll feel boring, and he's ready to just answer those. So if you ask one of these like random questions when you're feeling sick, which makes you feel better, I get thrown off guard a little bit today. I'm not just going to give you my background. I'm not just going to tell you how I got into real estate, how I got into business, how I got into podcasting. I'm going to start answering something that comes a little bit more unique from my heart. One of these is, what kind of collection do you have? And I have a freaking shoe collection. I have more shoes than almost anybody in the world, including most women. And I just love to have a bunch of different shoes. And so now all of a sudden, you know something random about me, and it can put our whole interview into a different direction. So let me answer this one. When I'm feeling sick, what makes me feel better? There's a couple things. I love chicken noodle soup, especially if it's homemade chicken noodle soup from somebody who knows how to make great soup. Another thing that I love when I'm sick is a hot bath, an Epsom salt hot bath. And I don't think everybody takes baths, but I'm a bath taker. I like baths for a lot of reasons, to soothe my muscles, but absolutely when I'm feeling unwell, I want to put some salts in that bath, and I want to chill, and maybe even light a couple of candles, make it romantic for just myself. Who knows? But chicken noodle and a hot bath. Those are a couple things that I absolutely love when I'm sick.
You know, this is amazing, because the reason I think a lot of people ask that question, tell us your story, because I'm here in Alabama. I'm not sure where you are, but here in the South, we want to know who you are before we want to know what you can offer.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like that get to know you question. Yep. And what you pointed out so well on your podcast was you're giving your guest an opportunity to go down a whole bunch of rabbit trails that you're going to have trouble getting the interview back from.
Sometimes tell us a little bit about how you got into entrepreneurship.
Right.
Sometimes it's 30 seconds. Usually it's about 2 or 3 minutes, but sometimes it's like 15 minutes, and you're like, my whole episode was going to be 15 minutes. And you just spent all of your time telling me where you went to college, how many kids you have. My listener doesn't give a Nikes about that.
Shiitake mushrooms. Yeah. So, well, let's go. I mean, in terms of like a podcast, why should a business owner consider starting a podcast? I mean, what's the benefit?
There's 3 main things that I think all business owners should be doing. A long time ago, it was 2015. I still think that's a long time ago, 7-8 years ago. I was a consumer of a guy's content named Gary Vaynerchuk.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And actually, it's funny because I just got home from Napa this weekend. I was in Napa for a week and bought way too much wine, way too much wine. But a lot of those wines I learned from Gary V when I started following him many years ago. I used to watch his wine library, and I never ordered his wines before, but I always watched and listened. And how does he taste? What does he talk about the nose? What does he talk about what you're on the palate? And it's funny because I just got back from Napa and got all of this wine, and I'm thinking about Gary V. And Gary V's always done something really, really well. He's always had a thought leadership platform. No matter what, he's always had a thought leadership platform. When he first started working for his dad with Wine Library TV, his dad had a liquor store, a wine store, and he started working for the store. Now he's like, how do we get this out? How do we figure out where things are going? So I've been following him for a long, long time. But in 2015, he said, if you don't have a social media presence and a thought leadership platform by the year 2022, and by the way, 2022 is almost over now.
Right.
If you don't have these things by 2022, you will lose in business. And I want that to sink into your listener right now. If you aren't active on social media, you will lose in business. If you don't have a thought leadership platform, you will lose in business. So now we'll talk about why would you lose in business and what is the benefit? Like you asked, Bethany, like what's
Right.
the whole benefit? So for example, when I have a thought leadership platform, that's a podcast. A podcast is a thought leadership platform. So would a book be a thought leadership platform. The whole purpose of this thought leadership platform is to get people to talk about you when you're not in the room. Now, yeah, they won't be talking bad about you. They'll be talking good about you, but it's when you're not in the room. Let me give you an example. Who are we talking about today that's not in the room? Gary Vee. He has a thought leadership platform. You and I are talking about him, talking about Wine Library, talking about what he's doing, talking about how he says you've got to have these things by 2022. We've used him as an example. I don't know how many times in just the last few minutes, and he's not even with us. We're speaking about Gary Vee, and he's not even in the room. The huge thing that's going to happen when you've got your book, when you've got your podcast, when you're putting out that content, your follower, your listener, your reader is going to share that stuff, your insights, the value you drop with their friends. So for example, when I had my real estate podcast, it was called Creative Real Estate. When I had that podcast prior to selling it, as you mentioned in the intro, I used to get people, in fact, just this week, 3 people have said to me, one of them was, no, 2 of them were actually on a discovery call. They wanted to work with my company to help them. They wanted to work with Grow Your Show to help them with their podcast. And one other person told me that they started listening to the Creative Real Estate podcast as one of their first introductions into the real estate investing space. And they said, I've been following you that long, and I see you're doing podcasting as a business. I want to work with you. You know what you're doing. I trust you. Well, those guys didn't hear about my podcast just from finding the podcast. As sad as that might sound, they didn't just search for a podcast. What's actually more wonderful than that is their friends told them to listen to a particular episode. Their friends said, hey, episode 242 on Creative Real Estate will help you to be able to figure out what market to select. It's got all these resources. You should listen to 242. And so then they go and listen to 242. Or like you mentioned, we'll call back to something you mentioned today. You just listened to the podcast that had 5 questions that you might consider. And you're sharing that, luckily, to my benefit, and also to your listener's benefit. You're sharing that with your listener. So now your listener's like, oh yeah, what are the other questions? She shared one. That sounded like a good, but what are the others? I need to know. I need to figure out what those are. And so then they are going to now go and listen to that episode. And it's going to help me grow my influence because you're talking about me even when I'm not in the room. I am technically this time, but the point is, the whole reason for thought leadership is to grow your influence by having people share your content. The more content you have, the more that they can share. The more good content you have, the more likely that they'll be sharing it. But you can't grow if you don't have a thought leadership platform. Unfortunately, let's go back to real estate a little bit. I used to do something called syndication. It is, it's like when a whole bunch of investors, general partners and limited partners, people that operate the deal and people that just passively invest in the deal, work together to buy a big property, like a $10 million apartment community. That we'll say it's 400 units, $10 million bucks. And I would work with a whole bunch of people to kind of buy that, but I need those passive investors. There was this guy, and he was wondering, how is it that Adam Adams, who had known a lot less, unfortunately, this is true. I had a lot less experience than he did, but all of his investors no longer were his investors. They were now my investors. It's because I was now the squeaky wheel. The squeaky wheel gets the grease. The podcaster gets the money. The squeaky wheel gets the grease. So for him, he was like, I needed to raise $2 million and all of my people are putting their money into your deal instead of my deal. What is going on? And I told the guy, this is a few years back, I told the guy, the whole thing is, I have a podcast. I have content. People are talking about me. I'm always in front of your person. You're not in front of your person. The only time you're in front of your person is when you need the money.
When you
So
want
you're
some.
emailing them and saying, hey, I'm ready to close on this deal, but they've already put their money in mine because I'm constantly adding value and content to their passive investor, for example. So if you've got a coaching program and you've been doing well through 2022, you're not going to be doing well next year because other podcasters are going to be the squeaky wheel. They're going to be taking your coaching clients because now this other person is more well known. They might not be as good as you. They're probably not as good as you. They might not be as experienced in you as you are. But here's the thing. Your clients today are going to be going to them because they are adding more value to your client than you are adding to your client. That's why you're losing in business 2022 and beyond. And Gary Vee has been saying this for 7-8 years. He's been talking about the same stuff.
Well, I think the big elephant in the room for most people, like you mentioned, Gary Vee, there's a tendency when we're thinking about, okay, we're going to do this new thing. I've never done a podcast before. I'm going to, launch this podcast, not really sure where to start. And then we start comparing ourselves to the people who have been doing it for 10 years.
Doing podcasting?
Yes. And so they're super successful. And we're thinking, well, I've listened to his podcast. There's no way I could be as good as him. So they get this imposter syndrome that ends up being the barrier to them actually implementing the podcast. So we've talked about that on the show here quite a bit because mindset, as you know, in business ownership is 90%. So what would you say to someone who's feeling intimidated?
Couple things. I want to talk about an experience that happened yesterday evening. And I also want to mention the advice that comes from the leader of a group that I'm a member of. I pay to be a member of his group. Yesterday, I was talking to my CrossFit coach, who ended up purchasing the gym, and they just announced it yesterday morning. And so I got the email. And I responded back to him. I was a little sad because I wanted to buy the gym. I didn't know the gym was even for sale, and I've been wanting to buy that gym. The truth is, I wish that I would have talked to the old owner, but I'm really happy for the new owner. And I told him yesterday in class, I said, hey, whenever you want to sell, you've already got a buyer. It's me. 'Cause I'm not gonna sit there and complain that I didn't get it. I'm just gonna say, hey, first and foremost, when you're ready for a buyer, you've already got one. It's me. I'm already your buyer. I want to buy this gym from you. And so he was really excited. And we started talking on my website. I have this thing that shares that it's an hour of my time for $500. And he's like, do you get anyone paying $500 for just an hour of your time? And I'm like, yeah, I do all the time. And it didn't faze me because the imposter syndrome, while I get it frequently, I didn't have it when I put that up. But I do look at people that have gotten degrees much higher than my degrees. For example, attorneys that are only charging $200, $150, $250, $350 per hour of their time. And here I am asking for $500, way double what most attorneys are. And he's like, I'm so impressed that you did that. And one of the things that I said to him is, a lot of the billionaires out there, they are no smarter than you and me. A lot of the people that charge more, that make more, money's not everything, but they have nothing more than you and I have. And I said, I actually think 500 is super cheap because I get my entire team on that call, and our plan is to give $5,000 of value to them. We do every time we have one of those calls, we 10x it. And so this brings me to what my coach would share. So first and foremost, takeaway number one, anyone out there who has done something, they're really no smarter or better than you. They're just people. Okay. They're just people. You're just a people. You're just a person, and they're just people too. Secondly, this coach is always talking about, if you feel good about it, this is takeaway number two. If you feel good about it, if you feel like you're adding value, doesn't give a shiitake mushroom what those other people are doing or thinking or offering or charging. So for example, with me, I feel like I'm giving $5,000 of value with my entire team. We're not there to sales pitch you. We're there to pour into your business. And I want you to walk away from that having at least been able to make 5 more thousand in your business because of that one conversation, that 1 hour conversation. But my coach, Sean McCloskey, he's always talking about, do you feel like you're worth it? Like, forget about these other people. When you look at the service that you offer, do you feel like you're giving that amount of value? And if so, then you can charge it. And that's, for me, is I feel like I could raise that price $500 an hour. I feel like I could really raise that price if I wanted to, because we're giving so much more value than that. And so that is just to think everyone's going to have imposter syndrome, but not one human being out there. I will talk about Donald Trump. I don't like him as much as a lot of people like him. You probably love him, and it doesn't mean you and I are in a fight. I don't like him that much. I don't think he's that smart. I don't think he's that great. I don't think he's that eloquent. Why on earth does he make billions of dollars when I only make hundreds of thousands of dollars? It's not fair. It makes no sense. He's nothing better than me. And there's a lot of other people that are highly wealthy, making a shiitake mushroom amount of money, a shiitake mushroom ton of money.
You like that, don't you?
I like it now. Yeah. There's a lot of people that are making like a crazy amount more money than I am. They're not smarter. They're not more eloquent. They don't have anything that I don't have at all. So why couldn't I also do that? And back to the second thing is, if I believe that I can add value, if your listener believes that your listener can add value to some people through a podcast or through a book, whatever kind of thought leadership,
right,
then they should do it, even though somebody else did it better. If you don't mind me giving one more example, This example is somebody that I know, and I can't remember who it is anymore, had some value. And he said that he learned everything from Tony Robbins. He followed Tony Robbins around for years. He was actually part of Tony Robbins' team as well. And all of his friends loved him and loved what he could offer. And he was starting to help people, but he had imposter syndrome. The problem is, he was like, yeah, but I just got this from Tony Robbins. I only learned this from Tony. None of this is original. And so he found out from somebody after his imposter syndrome and after it was holding him back. He found out that Tony Robbins, none of that was original. He got that from another guy who got that from another guy who got that from another guy. And some of these guys are why can't I think of their names? They're all very famous. They've all written books, and they've all put on. I just can't think of their names right this second. Oh well, that doesn't matter. The point is that Tony Robbins, it wasn't original for Tony Robbins. Tony Robbins was regurgitating it. But here's the thing: some people listen to this guy or gal. Some people listen to the guy or gal that they got the information from. Some people listen to the one before. One of them had a country southern draw, and he talked really slow, and I wish I could remember his name. He talked really slow, and he talked really kind of like this, and he made points like that, and I don't remember the guy's name right now, but the point is that drove some people nuts, and so they'd rather get it from Tony. But then Tony cusses. He doesn't say shiitake mushrooms. He says something else.
Well, he sure
And so,
does.
yeah, so there's some other people who are like, I can't. Tony's too abrasive. He's too loud. He cusses. He says the F word too much. I don't want to, I can't resonate with that. I'm too religious for that. I'm too informal for that. I'm too whatever. But I can listen to you and I can get that content from you. So whoever's listening and is feeling some sort of imposter syndrome, Bethany, I clearly know that you do. It's not because there's anything wrong with you. It's because all of us do. And I have imposter syndrome. I got imposter syndrome for this episode today, recording with you. And I knew you were going to ask me about podcasting stuff. And I knew that I crush it at podcasting stuff. And I still feel a little awkward and uncomfortable and uncertain and unsure. And am I going to be as eloquent as the next person? Am I going to give the value as the next person? Am I going to give too much details on 2 questions instead of like being able to answer 50 questions in an hour? Am I going to go 5 minutes on just 1 question? And I feel uncomfortable about it. But when I do it, here's the 4th and final takeaway. When I do it, I just think about the listener. I just think about what they need. And instead of like me worrying about how am I coming across, are people going to think that I'm dumb? Are people going to think that I'm whatever? Insert your concern here. Are people going to think this about me? And I start thinking, what can I do to help a small business owner or an entrepreneur to truly take advantage of this? And then your business entrepreneur who starts their podcast should only be thinking, what is my avatar? What does my listener need today? I don't care how I sound, how I come across. If I can pour into them with my full heart and give them the nuggets that are going to help them get to the next level, I've done my job, even if I sound like a dummy. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, and I think it comes down to a mindset of service rather than a focus on revenue or perfection.
Yes.
And I had a coaching call with someone this morning. And, you know, what I said to her is people are drawn to your imperfection. You know, so it was another woman that I was speaking to, and I said, you know, that friend you have that you go over to her house and everything in her house is perfect. Like there's no dishes in the sink and there's no laundry in the laundry room and there's no toys on the floor. And you sit there and all you can think of is, I'm never inviting her over to my house. Right?
Yep.
Because her perfection is making me uncomfortable. And I think the same thing is true of our listeners on a podcast. Okay, so we say 50 times, but that's real. That's genuine. We're not trying to pretend to be slick or, you know, something that we're not. We're just going to be who we are. And if that adds value to you, great, you'll listen. If it doesn't, you'll turn this off and no big deal.
Yeah.
So I think we just got to approach it from that standpoint of, you know, serving and let the rest of it take care of itself.
You're right.
I definitely had to overcome. And I think, you know, podcasting is really great for all personality types, because even if you're an introvert or someone who doesn't want to get on a camera, or maybe you just not quite comfortable speaking off the top of your head, at least initially, you can draft it out and read it. Mike Rowe does that on his podcast. He reads it. It's a story that he has typed out. So if you're that person, do that until you're comfortable with, you know, you'll get comfortable shooting from the hip later. And now I'm even I add it to YouTube. So it's not just out on audio podcasts, it's on YouTube as a video. And for me, that's progress. That's development, right?
That's awesome.
And imposter syndrome, I said to on the coaching call this morning, Being an entrepreneur is about getting comfortable, being uncomfortable. Because if we aren't pushing ourselves out of our like little zone where we feel like we're the masters of this zone, if we're not pushing ourselves, we're never growing. We're not going to evolve. We're never going to go to the next level. And as the business owner, you are the ceiling for your business. It's never going to grow. Your business will not grow past you. You are the ceiling. So that we have a responsibility to keep pushing ourselves upward so our business can grow as well. In your experience, what is the best resources for people just starting out in podcasting? What are some of the things that can really equip people to start on this journey?
Yeah. So some of the resources that I'm thinking of are going to be self-serving because we've created some resources for podcasters. So those can be of great value. The podcast on podcasting is one where we have every other episode is an interview, and the opposite is a solo episode of me pouring into the listener's business. It's a free resource. It costs literally nothing. And wherever they are listening to you today, they can easily find it. So there's one great resource that is completely free. Additional resources would be a lot of people want to know of the equipment that they should be getting for their podcast. And a lot of people that are ready to make that, they get completely stressed and overwhelmed about trying to make the decision of those equipment. Additionally, in most cases, and almost 99%, it feels very, very high. I would say 95% of people make this mistake. They actually buy the wrong kind of microphone. Let me explain it this way. Okay, you hear me right here, right now. It sounds pretty clear. And now you kind of hear my chair squeaking, and you kind of like it sounds like echoey. You could tell that I'm in a big room or whatever. So the thing is, most people get what's called a condenser microphone. They're very sensitive microphones. They pick up everything. I recommend a dynamic microphone. They're less sensitive, and they only really pick up what's right next to the mic. So you can hear it so clear right now. You can hear my voice just so clear. And it's just because I'm using a dynamic mic instead of a condenser mic. You know what I mean? And just like that chair is so...
I have the same chair.
Yeah. So if you went to growyourshow.com/PDF, you can get a PDF for free that has the webcams that I recommend, the lighting that I recommend, the soundproofing that I recommend, any mics, anything, any equipment that we've vetted and approve of is on there. For example, there's these Rode mics that are a couple $100, but I have 5 microphones on that web page on the PDF, growyourshow.com/PDF. I've got 5 microphones that cost less than any of the Rode mics, but all work at least as good as the Rode mic. So part of our purpose of making this resource so that people can get good equipment is that they're not overpaying. They're not wasting their money buying a Blue Yeti, which is a condenser mic that most people get because when they type in on Amazon, podcasting mic, Blue Yeti, even though it's not a podcasting mic, it comes up first. So I just recommend maybe getting that PDF. It's totally for free. You don't have to give us your email address or anything like that. We're not going to chase you around and pixel data you. It's just a free resource that you can use. I'll tell you the worst part about it for you is I might make a couple of dollars because the links on there are affiliate links. You won't pay extra, but I might make a couple bucks if you buy something on there. That's one of the ways we monetize our show. But the point would be that if you want equipment, that's a good way. If you want resources like learning and growing the podcast on podcasting, Other than that, one thing that I would just recommend to most podcasters, but most especially if they're a small business owner or an entrepreneur, they're already probably wearing a lot of different hats in their company.
Hmm.
It's unfortunate, but in most of our small businesses, we are kind of like our own accountant, bookkeeper. A lot of the times, we are our own sales team.
Hmm.
We're also the marketing team. We're also the customer service agent. We're also the the fulfillment portion of our company. In many cases, we wear all of these hats. A thing that I would recommend to most podcasters who are business owners and already got a lot going on is, if you can afford it, to have a team offloading most of your podcast for you. So you basically give off the editing and post production to a team. You could use our team at Grow Your Show. We do all of that. Or you could, it doesn't matter to me. I just feel strongly inclined to say a resource for you is to partner with somebody who can do that stuff. Because especially if you own, like Bethany, you own 3 or 4 businesses, I think.
Hmm.
That's I hope for your sake that you don't have to do your own editing on your podcast, because it gets to be a lot of work. So for the listener, if they're going to start this, they don't have to learn how to edit. They don't have to learn to produce. They don't have to learn to market their podcast. They could work with a team similar to ours, any team that they want, that can kind of offload that so that they can stay in their lane and focus on more of their business and not have to worry about editing a podcast 20 hours a week or something like that.
That's right. That's right. I actually have, one of my businesses is marketing agency. So
Oh
I
yeah.
have a team over there
Perfect.
that helps me. But there's your resource out there. There's
Yep.
lots of resources out there
Yeah.
for putting those together. Uh, Another thing is marketing strategies. Now, are there some specific marketing strategies for? I know social media plays a big role. What are some steps that people can take to make sure people know about their podcast? And
Yeah. It will depend on the budget. Um, and when I say budget, I also mean time. So if the business owner who's about to launch a podcast um, has a whole bunch of time and not yet much money, they will have different marketing strategies than somebody who has a whole bunch of money but not much time. But let me throw out like a few top ones that are really valuable and really can help people. One of which is a private message campaign, whereas you are private messaging, direct messaging, I call it DMing, your perfect avatar. And there's 3 platforms that we use for these private messages. We use meetup.com because it is very easy to narrow down your search to particular people in meetup.com, where you can private message them, because you can go to different groups throughout the world. I was lucky enough, blessed enough, and grateful enough that I built a really big meetup group a while back. In 2018, I got to speak at Meetup HQ. They flew me in on their dime,
nice.
and I got to be one of 6 speakers to their top 150 meetup organizers around the world. So I met meetup organizers from many different countries. I never knew there was 255,000 meetups back in 2018. There's probably more now, but back in 2018, there was 255,000 meetups, and I was one of the top 6 in the world. And during that time, I realized that you can narrow down the exact person in the exact city with the exact hobbies or interests or needs through meetup.com. 2 other places to go. LinkedIn.com. You can narrow down by looking at job titles,
Yeah.
where they live, what companies they work for, what job title they have, and you can start to find your people. Facebook.com is the third one, because you can go to groups just like the meetup groups. You can go to groups and you can find people, and you can see which ones were more active on Meetup. You can see which ones are more active on Facebook, which ones are posting, which ones are asking. And then now you can connect with them on Meetup, LinkedIn, or Facebook. You can connect with them, but your connection, you got to slow play this. This is a big takeaway. All right. When you are single and you want to, that eventually you want to be married, you don't just go to somebody who you're attracted to physically and say, you're attractive, I'm attractive, we should get married. Here's some qualities about me. I'm free I'm free every Saturday for the rest of my life. We could go on dates every Saturday. This would freak out that other person. It doesn't matter, male, female, whatever. It would freak them out if you just came up to them and said, you're hot, I'm hot, I think we should just get married. It's like, well, let's get to know each other. Let's figure out if we even connect, if we even get along. And people are using social media. They're hearing me say LinkedIn, Facebook, and Meetup. And they're like, all right, I'm going to create the perfect pitch. I'm going to tell everything about myself. I'm going to give all of my links and make sure I put my phone number in case they want to call me. And so now all of a sudden they have this giant text that they're copying and pasting, and they're sending it to everybody. Oh, this is what my company does. This is who we serve. These are all my links. Follow my website, and this is how we can help you. It's like getting married after just meeting somebody for the first time. It's too much, too fast. And most people are going to call you spam. Most people are going to ignore it. They'll virtually slap you in the face when you try to go too far, too fast with them. So you'll get a virtual slap. So with this, you want to have connections. So for example, I'll share with you exactly what I did yesterday at the same CrossFit gym. I hope she doesn't listen to this, because then she'll know I have a crush on her. Her name is Jill. Her name is Jill, and she's got this sick green Jeep. So Jill and I talk a little bit every now and again, right? Yesterday, I told her, I said, hey, do you ever get out and go off-roading with your Jeep? She's like, I have a couple of times, but not enough. And I said, the reason I ask is because I just bought a Jeep. I just bought a JL. This is like the newest one or whatever. And I'm looking for places where I should go to take it off road. So I was just kind of curious. And by the way, your Jeep, that green Jeep that you've got out there, I've always been attracted to it. Never known who owned it until I found out that it was yours. But I just got to tell you, last year during the summer, at the beginning of June, I actually rented a Jeep, and they had all of these different Jeeps, and one of them was that green color. And I'm like, that's the one that I want. And before I bought mine, and I wish I bought a green one, but I bought a black one. Before I bought mine, at that mastermind, that group of people that I was hanging out with, one of them said, you really want to buy one of these, don't you? And I'm like, yeah. And they go, what color would you buy? And I said, this color of green for sure. And I didn't, but just, I wanted her to know that I would have bought that same color. And then she goes into something. She goes, it's funny. I had to go to Illinois to buy that, Jill said just yesterday. She goes, I had to go to Illinois to buy that. And I'm like, Illinois? Why'd you go to Illinois? So this was my follow-up question. And then she goes, well, I wanted that exact color of green. It had to be a Willis, and it had to be a stick shift. And that's the only place in the country that had it. And everybody thought that I was crazy. I'm like, that's a stick? She goes, yeah. So we're getting into this detail. And that is me courting Jill, right? Just getting to know her on a real level, asking follow-up questions, and not going, you're attractive, I'm attractive, we should get married. That's your Jeep, right? How do you like it? I love that color. I just got a Jeep. Do you ever use it? You know what I mean? Hey, do you come here often? I like your shoes.
I hate to tell you this, Adam, but
yeah,
Jill knows.
I bet she does. I bet she does. But I'm still suave, right?
Yeah,
Pretty
that was
suave.
smooth. That was
All
smooth.
right. All right.
I'll give you that.
All right. So the point would be for your listener, when they use meetup.com, linkedin.com, or facebook.com, they're not going to have a giant message that gives all of the details and is a proposal on the very first time. They're going to say, hey, I saw your picture of your Jeep. That's a pretty sick Jeep. Or they're going to say something personal like, oh, I saw that picture of your kids. Your kids are so damn cute. Or they're going to see that they just did their first real estate deal. Bethany and I both have real estate in common. So they're like, oh, I just noticed that you just did your first real estate deal. That's awesome. Congratulations. How did you get into that? Okay. It's going to be personal. It's going to be a connection. That's the type of private message. So eventually this will lead to, Jill, we should go take our Jeeps out. And eventually it will lead to, hey, are you hungry? What kind of, do you like Indian food? Do you like sushi? Let's go grab some sushi. And then it will be,
You need to make
something.
that suggestion before somebody buys a red Jeep and pulls in.
Okay.
And then you have competition.
Fair enough. So, but I like to move slowly. And I think on the private message, this should be a slow campaign. This is one effective thing that if you've got more money than time, you can hire somebody. My team does this for other people. If you've got more time than money, you can personally do this yourself. If you're somewhere in the middle, you could probably hire like a virtual assistant to do it on your behalf. And it doesn't have to be as expensive as a team. It doesn't have to be as time intensive as you by yourself, but you can kind of manage your own VA to do these private messages and to keep them personal and not to ask for proposals the very first time. Don't send links, don't send your phone number. It's just a couple of quick questions. It's so I saw that you just started your business in the marketing, started your marketing agency. How did you get that started? It's that simple. So that's one way. Facebook ads are another way. However, you've got to know how to do Facebook ads because you don't want to waste money. You don't want to throw away the money. Facebook ads got to be done a particular way. We've got it down to a science where it's only costing a few cents to get somebody to actually listen to a podcast. As long as it's $1 or less, it's probably okay. But if you're paying $10, $20, $50 just to get one person to listen, you may as well go down to downtown and give people $50 to listen to your podcast instead. You're going to get a better result than throwing away Facebook ad money. But it's been really effective. Here's a couple of other ideas to market and grow a podcast. One of them is to reach out to somebody who has a email followership that is your same listener avatar. So they don't have a podcast, but they serve the same avatar. For you, Bethany, it might be somebody who's an entrepreneur. So maybe you could work with, Gary Vee, he's already got a podcast. So maybe it's not Gary Vee, but somebody else in that space who does marketing, but does not have a podcast. And you can pay them, write this down, this part's important, to give you 6 shout outs on their email list. Why 6? Because it takes 6 to 13 times for people to start trusting a message when they hear it. And if they share it 6 different times, it's more likely to get picked up by their people, to get trusted. The first time they saw it, they're like, that does actually look like a good podcast. I ought to do that. The second time is, oh yeah, I remember that, but like, I'm just busy right now, but I'll definitely need to look up that podcast later. The third time, they're like, man, what is it with this podcast? It seems like a really big deal. I really don't know why I'm taking so long and dragging my heels on this. I should really listen. By the 6th time, those people are going to listen. They are going to check it out. They are going to say, man, I'm just going to jump in. So that's why I say pay them to give you 6 shout outs, because that's really the minimum that it's going to take to get the most amount of bang for your buck. And that way, it's You're not buying an email list, by the way. You're not sending this to people that you don't know and being flagged as spam or anything like that. You're reaching out to somebody who's got those people following them. They already trust them. They already believe in them. And they are shouting out your show. So that's been a really effective way. We've also done banner ads. So you can go to different blogs. For example, within your industry, you can go to a blog in your industry and do the same thing. Like have them keep that ad up for 3 months or 6 months, whatever you can afford. But it's similar to sending it to their email list, but now you're just being featured on the blog. And another way to do it, this one is fairly expensive, but if you got the money, you can do it. We've done this just for one client so far because it is so expensive. But there is Spotify ads. So whereas Spotify has a minimum, what I love about Spotify ads is every single listener of whatever podcast it is, they listen to podcasts. They already use Spotify.
Right.
When you send the emails out to the email campaign, some people don't even know what a podcast is. I know 60% listen. That was your stat that you threw out today. 60% of people are listening. So that's wonderful. That's a good sign. But there's probably 20% that don't know how to find one, don't want to listen. They think that they're a fad, that they're going to go away. And so they're not going to listen right away. So the point would be, if you're doing a Spotify ad, every listener on that other person's podcast is a podcast listener, or they use Spotify, guaranteed, because that's where they're hearing it. And so it's very simple and easy for them to transition to listening to your podcast. And I'll mention one other thing that is very helpful. This is what I do. This is a main reason, like our podcast currently is ranking in the top 0.5% in the world. We have thousands of listeners, about 30,000 downloads per month. And which isn't the biggest podcast. There's some that get millions. I understand that, but I'm still happy about 30,000. And one of the reasons why we got there is because I do podcast interview swaps. So Bethany, I want you on my show and I want to be on your show. You know what I'm saying? Because I'm going to hack into your listener base. I know it sounds horrible. It sounds selfish, of course. But in a way, I'm here adding value. And one or two people that are already listening to your show, they're like, man, I kind of like this guy, Adam. I kind of want to start a podcast. He made a good point there. Maybe I'll check out his show. And they're going to go and check out my show and maybe, possibly, hire us as a team to work for them.
Right.
Same thing for you and your marketing agency or any of your other businesses, or for your listener and what they're trying to accomplish. These podcast interview swaps are really easy. Spotify ads, crazy expensive. My virtual assistant goes into Podbooker and Podmatch, where there's a lot of other podcasters there. Mm-hmm. And then they identify good entrepreneurship podcasts. And then they send out a thing that says, I work with Adam. We found your show and would like to know if you would be open to an interview swap. It's that simple. I'm paying them a few bucks an hour. There are virtual assistants in the Philippines. It's not going to be as expensive as like a $30 an hour person in the US, for example. And some of those people that get those messages are like, yeah, I would be open to it. Or what is an interview swap? How do we do a reciprocal interview? What does it look like? And so we'll end up doing an interview swap, and that's hugely beneficial. So that's how I do it. Now, if you have more time than I do and maybe less money, then you're going to do this on your own. You're personally going to be on Podbooker or Podmatch trying to get interview swaps. Now, if you have more money than me and even less time, then instead of having a virtual assistant do it for you, you're going to go and pay a company like Interview Valet. Interview Valet, it's about $500 per episode that you get on somebody else's show, And so what you'll do is you'll pay about $5,000 and you'll get on 10 episodes, or you pay $10,000 and you'll get on 20 episodes that year. And they will book you, and it won't be your virtual assistant, and you'll only pay $500 each time. So it's up to you, but those podcast interview swaps are hugely beneficial. And there's 3 ways to do it. Like I said, there's you on Podbooker or Podmatch doing it yourself, not paying anyone. There's your virtual assistant doing it, and you're paying them a small amount, and you're having to be involved a tiny bit. Or the third one is you pay a company a giant amount of money, $500 per episode, and they will put you on and get you featured on these podcasts. Interview Valet is a really good resource. I'm actually an affiliate for them. If somebody reaches out to me and they're like, I'm ready to spend that $500, I think I can get you a small discount doing it. So feel free to reach out if that's what you're looking for. Be more than happy to help. But those are some of the best ways, absolute best ways to grow a podcast listener base. The social media used to seem to work even better than it does now. I've been in the podcast space for like 7 years now. And wow, that's mind-boggling to think of because I feel like I'm brand new. 7 years it's been, but with us and throughout that time, we used to do more social media, and we got a significant amount of people finding us through it. The problem is most people don't do organic social media the right way. And secondly, it's not working as well as it did 7 years ago, 6 years ago. But I will give a couple quick tips. Most people, when they try to use the social media, this is the way that they approach that situation. They will basically put a picture of their guest. They'll put a link to the podcast, and that's all. There's no what's in it for me. There's no like, how do I help my perfect avatar? If my avatar reads this, how do I grab their attention? I call it hook, story, offer. Hook, story, offer. We need to get the hook. We need to grab attention. We need to stop the scroll, if you can write it, or pattern interrupt. Mm-hmm. Those are the ways we do this. Hook, story, offer. So you get that hook, and then you do the story, and then you do the offer. Like, what I would do is, for example, going back to an episode you listened to, the 5 questions that you might want to consider. We might put something on social media that just says, if you have a podcast, what kind of questions do you ask? ? Are you asking the right questions? ? I recently recorded an episode of 5 questions that you might want to consider. If you're interested, let me know in the comments. This is how I do it. If you're interested, Let me know in the comments. Now, here's the takeaways. I did not give a link to my podcast. What happens when you do a link is there's an algorithm within social media, like Facebook, for example, that says, oh, shiitake mushrooms. This person's about to take somebody away from Facebook. Right. When they go to this outside third-party place like a podcast, they're going to get stuck in the podcast, and they're not going to be on Facebook. And we need to make money. We only make money if people are using our Facebook ads. People only use our Facebook ads if we have more attention. So we are competing for attention. So I have an algorithm automatically when somebody gives a link to their podcast where I shadow ban that. Nobody can see it. Nobody's going to know that this was posted unless they specifically go to your own page and are searching and scrolling. But it doesn't show up because there's the shiitake mushrooms that Facebook says, I'm not gonna let people see this because then I will make less money. I got to keep people on Facebook, not going away from Facebook. So that's why instead you say, let me know in the comments, because now you're actually getting engagement. And now Facebook's saying, wow, this person's getting more people to stay on Facebook. I better push this post in front of more people instead of blocking it from more people. So it switches the roll around, gives you more organic traction. And then later you can private message those people and say, hey, you said you wanted that link. Here it is. Let me know what you think of it. Put that in quotes, write it down, underline it. Here's the thing you wanted. Let me know what you think. Give me some feedback after you listen to the episode, give me some feedback. So now instead of just giving a link, now they are inclined to need to actually listen to it, because they're like, oh, he pointed out that I wanted it, and I have to be congruent with what I said. So I actually have to listen. He also asked me to give feedback. So now I have to more thoroughly listen through it so that I can give this feedback. So they actually are going to listen. They're going to give that feedback. And then you say, thank you so much for your feedback. I really appreciate it. Hey, if you wouldn't mind, what you said was so beautiful. If you could just copy and paste it and make it a written review of the podcast, that would be so cool. All they have to do is copy and paste it. So now you're getting that social proof as well. There's so much to this, but if social media can work for you, but it can also work against you. What most people are doing, trying to promote their podcasts or promote their meetup groups or promote their business, they're doing too many links. They're doing too many telling instead of asking. Ask, don't tell. When you ask, you stop the scroll. When you ask, that's a pattern interrupt. That's why I keep saying question mark. Hey, do you want to have better questions for your podcast? Question mark. Here's some questions that you could do. So we hook them with something that will actually give them pattern interrupt, make them start to think. But when you just tell them something, when most people are like, posted another episode today, here's the link. There's nothing that's in it for the listener. There's no care. It doesn't make me interested. It doesn't make me curious. But here's five questions that you might consider for your podcast. That makes you curious. You're like, well, what are the questions? Well, I might consider one or two of them. What are the questions? I've got to listen.
I had to listen. I got hooked.
So make sure you're asking on social media versus telling, because the telling is not a pattern interrupt. They've been told things by everybody else, and that's why they just scroll and scroll and scroll. You need something that's going to stop the scroll. You need a pattern interrupt. You need a question. You need something outlandish. For example, if it's in real estate, 3 reasons why this year's not a good year to invest in real estate. Let's just pretend that was true. It doesn't matter whether it is or isn't. It's going to stop the scroll. People are like, wait, I thought Bethany owned a brokerage, and she's saying there's reasons not to. I'm curious. They stop the scroll and they want to read. So that's the hook. Then you give the story, and then you give the offer is, I recorded an episode. If you want to hear it, let me know in the comments. I'd be happy to get you that link for free. Or I'd be happy to put you as part of my webinar for free. Would you like a link to the webinar? Just let me know in the comments. And then now you're getting people to engage and adding more. So hopefully that's valuable. I know that was a lot, but I really wanted to share some ways to grow a podcast.
And some of the things that we teach inside the Time to Thrive membership for pattern interrupt that you're talking about is using color blocking, where the upper 2/3 of the graphic is one color and the bottom third is a very contrasting color. And because it's not a half and half kind of thing, it messes with people's eyes as they're scrolling. It creates like that, oh, wait, what's this? And then you can put your question in that top half.
That's cool.
We like the this or that questions too, true or false.
Yeah.
Option 1, option 2, door number 1, door number 2. We like those
Human
kind of
beings
things.
Cannot resist giving their opinion.
Right.
When we get clients to start a brand new podcast, and this is a great takeaway too, we have them put 4 different podcast artwork options. And we basically just say, hey, I need your help. I can't decide on a podcast artwork. That's the hook. I need your help. I can't decide on podcast artwork. My perfect avatar is this person. This is a story. My perfect avatar is this person. It's an entrepreneur. It's a real estate investor who wants to achieve X, Y, and Z. And these are the 4 options that I came up with, that my team came up with. What do you think? Or if you think 2 of them need to have a baby, what would that look like? And then 2 of the different artworks had a baby, right? So if they were a combination of the 2. And so then my client, one of them, this was 2 days ago that I spoke with them on a coaching call. And she was like, I have never had, she's like, I can't believe I got so much traction on that. I've never had that many comments on anything ever. And I said, I told you were going to get a lot of comments if you did it this way. So what, did you not believe me? Because of course I was offended that she would even question it. But I was like, of course it's going to work. Of course it's going to work. Human beings can't resist. So you, Bethany, you mentioned it specifically so well. Is it this or this? Human beings cannot. We have to. We have
share
to
what
do
we
that.
think. Our
It's the
opinions
weirdest
are
thing.
important.
I can't avoid it. That's why I go into so much detail. When you ask me a question on this podcast, I'm like, oh yeah, get excited. I can share all of the background and the thought process. I think, and I hope it can really resonate and stick to the listener, because I'm just so excited about sharing my opinion. Everybody wants to share their opinion, and so let them.
I have one last question for you.
Sure, let's do it.
Let's give our audience some encouragement. For those who are just thinking about starting a podcast, action, no action, nothing happens, right? So maybe you can give them some encouragement on taking some action to get their podcast going.
Oh, man, that's good. So I'm thinking if I didn't have a podcast right now, what would I need to hear? And really what I think I would need to hear is you don't have to figure it out yourself. You can work with somebody who knows how to. You could, if you wanted, if you're uncomfortable, because all of us have that imposter syndrome we spoke about earlier. You can, if you're uncomfortable, have a co-host. You can work with somebody. So now you don't have to be the one to figure it out. The point of it is you need to have a thought leadership platform. It should probably be a book or a podcast or a YouTube channel or a combination.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And that is because Gary Vee literally said you will lose if you don't start it now. So if you are listening and you're like, man, I probably ought to do that. First and foremost, within 2 years of launching my first podcast, my gross income, don't take this as a net number. I'm not trying to say I netted this. My gross income from 2 years of starting a podcast went from 40 something thousand to 600 and something thousand within about a year and a half of launching a podcast. So it's like, if you're struggling right now, if you're not really going to what you're going to get the value from having a podcast. I mean, you just have to, because now people can talk about you when you're not in the room. Now you'll be able to stay in front of people even when you're asleep. Now you can record something one time, and 10 years from now, people are still getting that value. So there's a lot that's going to happen. The big thing that I want you to understand is how to overcome your own objections. I don't know how to start a podcast. I'm not a techie. Work with somebody. I'm afraid to put myself out there. Partner with somebody. I'm not sure about this. Figure it out, because like you can stay at 42,000 a year, or you can go to 600 and something thousand a year. Whatever it is. Maybe you're making $1 million. Maybe this will take you to 30 million. So.
Right. Well, and we're in the age of instant gratification. And when you're building thought leadership, it's not 1 or 2 episodes in.
Yeah, that's a really good point. We tell our clients, if you're thinking about starting a podcast, don't even do it if you can't maintain it for at least 3 years. Like if you can see yourself doing this consistently for 3 years, you should probably start one. If you think, I'm just going to have a podcast for a couple of months, barely hit my 40th episode, and then quit, it's not going to work. Most people only get to like 6 episodes. Like I think it's like 90% or something get to just 6 episodes. So you're on point. You've got to be persistent and determined, because that's what makes real success. A lot of people, they dabble in something. So they're like, I tried a YouTube channel. I tried social media for 2 weeks. I tried a podcast for 40 episodes. I tried to advertise on Facebook. None of it worked. I'm just useless. I'm just going to fail at whatever I try. Here's the thing. You aren't persistent or determined.
All right. Adam Adams, growyourshow.com. Go check him out. And I also love that you put your prices right on your website, so people know right up front. Full transparency. Love it, Adam.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.